Welcome to Open Matters, an interview series designed to explore the intersection of open source and open standards with folks in our industry. I'm your host, Guy Martin, the Executive Director of Oasis Open. Today, we're going to cover a topic that many of you probably haven't thought of, but that has the potential to impact our society in many ways. Being able to easily and automatically verify the country of origin for physical goods and their components may sound straightforward. However, doing this efficiently has tremendous impact not only on the free trade of goods across borders, but also on other societal issues like reducing our carbon footprint. Joining me today is Todd Smith, the founder and CEO of KYG.Trade, who also serves as the chair for a new project here at Oasis called OriginBX, which is designed to address this need. Todd's an expert in this space, having spent almost 20 years at firms like KPMG and Ernst Young, working on issues of trade compliance. Todd, thanks for joining me today on the show.
Thanks, guys. Super excited to be here.
Cool. So, Todd, can you give us a little history on the origins, pun intended, of OriginBX? What led to the creation of this project, and who are your major stakeholders?
Sure. After serving as a consultant with the Big Four, serving Fortune 50 clients around the world on trade compliance, the thing that just drove me crazy and several of my colleagues was just the amount of time that was required to get our arms around the products that were being imported or exported. And when I say getting our arms around the product, what I mean is in order for us to help our clients determine the country of origin of their products or the tariff codes, which determines the rate of duty for their products, we spent a tremendous amount of time figuring out, how the product was manufactured, bills of materials, product images, spec sheets, ingredients, and the way that was done was via email and PDF and attachments. There was no systematic way of doing it. It drove me crazy, and it led to the creation and the idea to come up with a project, an open standards project that's industry agnostic, government agnostic, to help address the problem.
Cool. And, as I mentioned at the top of the show, this isn't really a topic a lot of people really think about, right? I think we just kind of all assume that free trade happens and everything works. Yeah. Why is now really the right time to be concerned about the automation of this and the standardization in this area?
Well, it's really an amazing time. There are several forces at play that I think are highlighting the importance of origin. So they range from government controls. There is a trend towards more nationalistic politics. We're seeing legislation introduced in the United States. It's happening in other countries too, where there's more emphasis on government procurement of goods that are made in the USA, in our example, but in other countries too. The pandemic has had a lot to do with that because countries and governments learned how dependent they were on supplies and ingredients that were sourced offshore. So there are trends occurring politically, as well as end consumers are becoming more conscientious of the source of goods that they are consuming, whether they're food or products. Beyond trade benefits, which we'll get into, as I'm sure you know, there's been a lot of discussion regarding forced labor and making sure that products that are purchased and consumed aren't made with forced labor. And then last, the other, what's compounding, I guess, the problem around this is that the rules for determining country of origin from an import compliance or governmental reporting purposes is actually quite complex. And at the same time, whereas historically you've had big box importers bringing products in large containers, the trend has been a tremendous actual shift, an exponential shift to small parcel importations. So, through e-commerce websites, we now have hundreds of thousands of importers, small and medium-sized importers, that are bringing products in small parcels, express consignment, FedEx, UPS, and even the mail. And our government and other governments have done research, and they've learned that a tremendous amount of fraud, um, pirated, products, um, uh, safety issues, and just false reporting of what are in these small parcels is occurring through this channel. So there were more controls around goods coming in big boxes than there have been historically on goods coming in small parcels. And so the governments are now also introducing stricter controls in the reporting of what's coming in these small parcels. At the same time, you have these hundreds of thousands of merchants that don't understand the complexity of determining what is the correct country of origin that they now have to report, or soon will have to report, to the authorities. So
Right.
it's a long answer, but it's a compounding issue of nationalism, tighter controls on made in country X, Y, or Z. If not that, just actually knowing the country of origin, and then thirdly, a whole influx of importers that don't really understand the rules. So it's for all
Okay.
these reasons, that I think the timing has now come to address this issue of helping all of these small and medium-sized merchants figure it out, but at the same time solving the what I call morass of emails and PDF attachments that are floating around in redundancy of importers asking producers and manufacturers for information about their products so they can actually answer these questions on origin.
Okay. Do you think kind of couple of questions kind of stem from that as I thought about what you were saying? Does this also have the potential ability to level the playing field a little bit for some of these smaller to medium-sized importers that don't have kind of the larger infrastructure that maybe some of the big box importers have, but level that playing field in terms of kind of increasing that free flow of goods?
Absolutely. Surprisingly, even some of the best, most compliant companies in the world, they don't get it right, and that's why I was in business. But those larger companies have resources, and they can afford to hire expensive consultants to help them out. So where this Origin Oasis project, this Origin BX Oasis project, is going to help level the playing field, is that by coming up with an agreed set of specifications and standards around the attributes of a product that are needed by experts or smart systems to determine country of origin, by making that a standard that is open source for anybody to grab out of a GitHub repo and deploy it in their own systems or on an e-commerce website, we do think that is going to make it easier for the SMEs to figure this out and become more compliant. The other way I think that this is going to level the playing field is that there is tension between domestic producers and foreign producers.
Mm.
Obviously, domestic producers want stricter controls on the reporting of country of origin for products that are imported, and it's coming in the form of legislation. Importers and even e-commerce merchants and websites are kind of pushing back on this legislation because it's creating more onerous administrative compliance requirements on behalf of the importers. But at the same time, a lot of domestic producers are in fact importing raw materials and intermediates that then get finally assembled or manufactured into a product in the United States. But that in itself doesn't necessarily mean that the product is manufactured or made in the USA, again, because of the complexity of not only the U.S. customs import rules and regulations, but the FTC. So it will level the playing field because there are actually lots of U.S. manufacturers that will put a label "Made in the USA" when in fact, under the regulations, it may not be because of inputs that weren't disclosed
Hmm.
properly. So we
Interesting.
think this project and the awareness around it is going to help level the playing field on both sides of that battle.
And then and that's great that you mentioned that. And then from the kind of the consumer perspective, I almost look at this as you mentioned, throw a label on it that says made in the US when it's really not. Is this also going to help consumers at some point kind of look at this as a truth in labeling, right? We have standards, government standards around truth in food labeling, for example. Do you think this has the same potential impact on just, truth in labeling about what's in a product and where it came from?
Absolutely. Consumers, regulators, even financial institutions that may provide lending incentives through a reduction in interest rates, for letters of credit or borrowed funds, based on country of origin. It's going to help improve that visibility. Now we're seeing a tremendous increase in track and trace platforms using blockchain technology
Hmm.
primarily that consumers are starting to utilize, with QR codes on products, where they can actually see from farm to table is how a lot of these platforms are advertised. Where um, a food product, for example, is sourced. All right, so we have the ability to do this today with technology, with track and trace. I would submit that most of those platforms are most effective if it's a product that doesn't undergo processing or combining with other materials. The Origin project that we're working on is really solving the more complex manufactured product. So think of a finished product with thousands of intermediates or parts, or even more than
Hmm.
a dozen. Um, if the inputs are coming from multiple sources, or if the raw material is getting processed and then split and distributed and multiplied, um, those track and trace type platforms, lose their ability to go down to raw material. I mean, if it's lettuce coming out of a ground, it's easy to track and trace, But if it's steel or oil, right, that gets processed and consumed in an ingredient that is combined with other products, it's a lot harder to do, and that we're solving for that type of complexity.
Okay, cool. No, that makes a lot of sense. So as I think through this, and as we've had our discussions when you started this project, clearly this is really important work, especially as it relates to free exchange and trade of goods worldwide. But can you kind of touch on some of the deeper reasons, and you hinted at them earlier, but some of the deeper reasons on why this work is important? You've used examples in the past with us about reduction in carbon footprint, reduction in forced labor, those sorts of things. What other areas, societal and other sort of ancillary benefits, do you see to this work?
Well, I think those are major ones. I mean, there are lots of companies. Well, you may be familiar in the United States, there was a conflict minerals law that was passed, gosh, maybe 10 years ago. And publicly traded companies need to report on their annual filings, whether or not there are any conflict minerals used in the production of their goods. Um, Today, because of forced labor issues, the Uyghurs, there's a spotlight, because it involves humans, and
Hmm.
so from a societal standpoint, I think what we're doing is very important from that standpoint. But in a more macro sense, I think one of the other big benefits is the ability for more traders, more importers and exporters, whether they're large or they're SMEs, small and medium enterprises, especially from developed and developing countries, to be able to utilize free trade agreements. And when I say utilize free trade agreements, what that does is it makes their products, if their products qualify for free trade benefits, it makes their products more competitive. And if it makes their products more competitive, then the intended benefit of free trade agreements is to lift GDP and lift the economies, of countries that are involved in these free trade agreements, many of which are developing and lesser developed countries. So, from a broad macroeconomic standpoint, if we can help small merchants in countries where there are free trade agreements in place, and if we can help them get through and cut through the complexity of qualifying their products for these free trade benefits, which is extremely complex. I mean, I'll just give you an example. Um, every free trade agreement, has a rule for qualifying a product for the free trade benefits. It's called a rule of origin. There could be in the automotive industry, for example. My calculations are there are probably 2,000 different rules of origin for parts and components that go into an automobile. That's why I was hired and made a living at the big four. I mean, this is complex stuff. So that's just automotive. So if we can help, small merchants that don't have access to expensive consultants who really understand the complexity of qualifying their goods, and I'm talking about complex manufactured goods, not just as I mentioned earlier, a vegetable coming out of the ground, but for components and raw materials and manufactured goods, if we can break through the complexity and streamline, reduce the cost, reduce the hassle, and make it easier for them to qualify their goods for free trade, then they're going to benefit, as a merchant, but also as a country by lifting their GDP, and that's really
Cool.
exciting.
Yeah, no, it is exciting. And I kind of wanted to circle back on something really quick because you sort of mentioned it in passing, but how is this done today? Because it seems like the way it's done today, from what you've told me, is it just mind-boggling in 2021 that this is still the way these kinds of things operate.
It is mind-boggling. So think about this. There are approximately 20 trillion in manufactured goods that trade borders every year. I mean, that could go up and down depending on trends or pandemics. So it's getting close to 20 trillion a year.
Mhm.
In the U.S. alone, granted, a very big economy, roughly 17. There are 17 billion, I would say, in benefits available to importers. Benefits in the way of reduced or elimination of import duties if their products qualify. All right, so this is big, right? So yeah, we're
Right,
we're
right.
talking, and we think that probably 50% of all importations actually would qualify for these benefits if the importers, were able to understand the rules around them, or they were willing to just spend the time and effort administratively to figure out if their products qualified, but they don't. So there's like, you can look at maybe 8 billion a year is just being left on the table, and this is just in the US alone, just because of the complexity and, as I mentioned earlier, the amount of time involved to figure this out. And again, how do you figure out if your product qualifies? It actually starts with a review of the bill of materials of a product, as I mentioned earlier, um, ingredients, production processes, steps in the production process. This is the type of information that has to be evaluated in order to determine if your product qualifies, if it passes a rule of origin under a free trade agreement, and thereby entitles you to free trade benefits. So
Right.
there's just a massive amount of emails and PDFs floating up and down the supply chain to, for experts and compliance professionals to figure out how the product is produced so that they can then determine if the product qualifies. That's how
So
it's done
essentially,
today. That's
manual
how it's done today.
intervention,
It's
manual intervention, and reading PDFs, basically.
There is no systemic way today of grabbing product attribute data and then ingesting that attribute data into what I call a smart FTA oracle. that would be driven by AI and ML that would produce a result. Yes, your product qualifies or not. I mean,
Wow.
some companies have paid lots of money to implement systems that will do this for their products, products that they control the bill of materials because they're the producer. In those cases, and it's few and far between. There are systems out there that will do this, but it takes a lot of time and effort. When rules change, when NAFTA became USMCA, it was a complete rewrite for many industries of how those systems worked. So it's extremely complex, lots of paperwork involved, and not only are probably half of the benefits going untapped, I would say actually, there are studies that the World Customs Organization has done that indicate somewhere between 17 to 22% of companies that are claiming free trade agreement benefits have risk, because those studies have shown that when they report that the product qualifies for a free trade agreement under customs audit, retrospectively, they find that the product, in fact, did not qualify for the free trade agreement. So there's inefficiencies all around. There's money being left on the table because of the effort involved in the complexity. At the same time, there's risk for those that do take the benefit, but in fact, their products don't qualify. So you import a product today, you tell the government that it qualifies for a free trade agreement benefit. You have to wait 5 years for customs to possibly come back and audit that claim and determine if it was true. 5 years. Now, other countries, they have a 3 year, it's called a statute of limitation or look back period. So if customs audits you, what are they going to do? They're going to send you an email, or they're going to send your broker an email with a request for information in the form of a PDF that has a list of questions, and then you are going to either have your lawyer or you're going to hire a consultant, from a big four that's going to start gathering information about the product and the import that could have occurred 4 years ago. So how are you going to do that? It's how we did it today. It's email, PDF, to the buyer's agent, to the distributor, right? To the producer, to the supplier, and it goes through countries up and down. And it could take weeks, months to prepare all that information and figure out what happened 3 or 4 years ago. So again, the project that we're working on is going to create a standard around how companies report product attributes and provide product attributes to their participants, their customers, their suppliers in the supply chain, and even the government authorities, the customs authorities, to make this whole process way more efficient. And it's going to enable using blockchain technology, again, open source techniques and processes for maintaining the location, of source records that may need to be retrieved and accessed for future audit purposes. That's another goal of our project.
Cool. No, I mean, it's just really interesting to me. The more I talk to you about this, and when you first came to us, obviously I knew very little about this, and just hearing you talk, and I'm glad our viewers are going to get a chance to see this, because it's just interesting to me how kind of deep it goes. And you wouldn't think about it just looking at it on the surface. Oh yeah, country of origin, great. But it's got so many layers and aspects to it that it's really interesting to me how it all kind of fits together. So let's shift gears a little bit. I'm always interested in the reasons that projects come and choose to come to Oasis. And I know that part of that is what we're really proud of, the lightweight and flexible governance model that we've built for standards and open source. But was that the only reason you chose to bring OriginBX here? Was there anything else that really attracted you to want to come and work with Oasis on this?
Well, first of all, I shout out to my former firm that I retired from, EY. They were doing work with Oasis. You guys are sponsoring the Baseline project, which is a project, a blockchain project, as I'm sure you know.
Yep.
That's an open source project that EY was heavily in or is heavily involved in, as far as I know. And so that's how I learned um, about Oasis, and I saw the success, that you had in bringing competitors that had a common interest in solving a problem that would benefit, their ecosystem, come together in a non-threatening, open format to achieve a desired result. And this origin conundrum that we have is bigger, than one industry or company. It's bigger than one government, one country, and we needed a format and a platform that would be non-threatening, that would invite what I call co-opetition,
Hmm.
of industry players to feel comfortable about working together to solve this issue. And I couldn't be happier, that you and your team, which is really marvelous, has embraced the idea and is and remains enthusiastic about the potential of the project. Because I mean, this, Todd Smith alone would never have been able, to organize, a
Hmm.
project like this. I don't have any credentials whatsoever, in running an open project, you know, and so having the the reputation and the background and real life projects that you guys have done under your belt that are global, they're not just U.S. centric,
Hmm.
was terrific. And yeah, this would not have happened, without Oasis. And it's exciting that we got the project kicked off. I don't know if you wanted to get into who some of the players are and some of the supporters are, but uh,
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually going to ask you that next. So you're one step ahead of me.
yeah, sorry. So yeah, we've gotten a really great cross section of companies to be founding sponsors of the project. And I don't. There's a lot of them. I'm not going to be able to mention all of them, but some of the ones that I'm really excited. I'm excited about all of them, but we got IBM, that agreed to sponsor the project, and that's obviously a great testament to an acknowledgement of the problem that we're trying to solve. We got UPS, obviously a global trader, global player, not a trader, but a facilitator, of packages, and they're also a big broker. We got Amazon, which obviously is
Yeah.
one of the world's largest e-commerce, B2C e-commerce platforms, to sign up. We've gotten the consulting firm Accenture, to sign up. Thomson Reuters is a big sponsor. So these are really large companies that are involved in international trade that are all also dealing with the issue around origin. They're dealing
Right.
with the emails, they're dealing with the manual processes, and we all agree that there's got to be a better way. Again, the beauty of this is just the fact that we have this cross section of companies that are coming together, to
Right.
help, with the project. One other sponsor that I definitely want to shout out to, is the International Chamber of Commerce, which is headquartered
Yes.
in Paris. And, you know, we're also talking, and there's a lot of interest from the World Customs Organization itself and the World Trade Organization, the WEF, even U.S. Customs is watching the project closely. And for organizations, I should also mention the World Bank, but for large global policy setting organizations, I thought the International Chamber of Commerce would want to serve as an observer, but instead they actually wanted to, and they did, become a sponsor. And the reason for that is that the ICC itself has a very strong digital standards initiative. It's run by a gentleman named Oswald out of Singapore, and his goal is to drive digital standardizations within trade. And he saw this project as fitting right within that mandate of his, and he wanted to send the right signal and messaging to the world of trade that this is an important project, and beat the drum loudly. And so he said that he wanted to do that by actually being a paid sponsor, and he's in the ICC is a member of our governing board. So what we're doing now, and I hope I'm not going too far, down your list of questions, but what we're doing is we're evolving now from this initial set of sponsors,
Right.
and we're now in the process of forming industry specific working groups.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be very important because each industry has its own nuances and set of requirements in the way they go about determining origin of their products,
Right.
or the way they go about determining their ESG, environmental sustainability, social and governance claims for their products. So if it's conflict minerals, and you're a technology company, the way you're going to look at how you attest to conflict minerals, it may be different from a mining and minerals company or an apparel and footwear company. So
Right.
these working groups that we're in the process of forming are going to be verticals, and we've formed our mining and minerals and ESG working group, and we're in the process of forming additional working groups in electronics and technology, apparel and footwear, automotive, and soon pharmaceuticals and biotech.
Right. That's great. Well, yeah, and you just hit upon the first part of my kind of one of my final questions is, what are you doing beyond the initial launch? So thank you for that. You answered that. In addition to that, can you tell folks out there who may be seeing this how you get involved? If this is something they think their company's interested in, how do they get involved?
Well, OriginBX dash Oasis.org is the landing page for everything
Mm-hmm.
around the OriginBX project. So if you
Okay.
type in OriginBX, BX for blockchain exchange, although we've evolved from blockchain exchange, or you just type in Oasis, go to your website. The Oasis website has information on this project, and there are places where you can sign up to volunteer to be a member of one of our working groups or a sponsor. Come one, come all, from all industries. This is going to be
Right.
a big growing project. We hope to have our first deliverables, on a message set later this year. And those are going to be made available on GitHub. Um, your viewers can feel free to email me directly. And so I am Todd at KYG.io. I'm sure that information will be made available.
Right.
Yeah, so reach out to Oasis, go to the OriginBX website, reach out to me directly, and just let us know you're interested in getting involved somehow.
Cool. And actually, Todd, you brought up a great point sort of in there that I want to highlight to folks is that this is one of our open projects. So you don't have to be a member of Oasis to participate. Now, if your company wants to sponsor, get on the project governing board, help, basically move this work forward from a sponsor standpoint, you can absolutely do that, but you don't need to be a member to come in and make contributions. It's really part of the beauty, I think, of the open projects model is we want wide participation. Cool. Okay. So, here's an opportunity, Todd. Any final thoughts or comments? We've covered a lot of ground, obviously really exciting stuff, but anything you want to leave our viewers with?
No, I just hope that something that you heard, during this interview, makes you want to get involved. Because number one, it's cutting edge work that we're working on. It's really going to change the way trade compliance and ESG compliance works. It's going to make life and our industry more efficient. And again, it's going to lift economies in the lesser developed and developing countries. And so it's a great cause. And so, yeah, I just hope, we get more people to jump in and help out with the creation of these standards.
Cool. No, I completely agree. It's fantastic, Todd. Thanks a lot for joining me today. I'm always super interested, kind of as from an engineering recovering, jokingly say a recovering engineer here. I'm always interested in how the intersection of technology and the physical world plays out. And this is one of the most, the biggest example I've seen of that. And I think
Cool.
OriginBX has an important role to play, in helping us keep the free flow of goods moving across borders, both now and in the future. So again, super excited to see where this takes us all. So thanks again, Todd, for joining us.
Very cool.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you, Guy. I appreciate it. And shout out to all you folks at Oasis. You guys are doing just a fantastic job. So thank you. Thank you all.
Appreciate that. Thank you. So, folks, if you want to learn more about the OriginBX work or other Oasis projects, as Todd mentioned, you can find us at oasis-open.org. Let's continue this conversation on Twitter at OasisOpen. Once again, everybody, until next time, thanks for listening.